When we curl our fingers, we're pulling on a long flexor that extends from the fingertip all the way to the elbow and pulls tightly over the wrist. So what happens when we curl our fingers, there's tightness from the fingers to the hand and to the forearm, and it's very hard to move, and certainly next to impossible to move the fingers. When we stretch the fingers, we're pulling them sideways using the abductor muscles. Often we go to the extreme range of motion all the way. Sometimes it's a little bit less, but however you're doing it, stretching causes extreme tension. We're activating a muscle that shouldn't be activated and makes it impossible for the fingers to move again. Twisting motions, the hand moving to the right or to the left, causing wrist pain on the two sides of the wrist, as well as swelling, which is called ganglia. Finger isolation, lifting one finger at a time. It's a major cause for tension and pain on the upper part of the hand and the forearm. Common habit is for the wrist to drop, breaking the alignment between the hand and the forearm. This is a major cause for carpal tunnel syndrome, pain in the wrist. So how can we avoid doing these things which cause tension and fatigue and pain and injury? So one of the things to realize that when we see someone playing the piano or other instruments, or are typing at the computer, or going to the mouse, or clicking on a smartphone, we have to realize that what we see is finger move. The answer lies in the fact that the fingers alone cannot do everything. What we see when we look at someone playing or typing, we see fingers motion. But the fingers are connected to the hand, and the hand is connected to the forearm. When these parts move together, they form the basic alignment for correct motions. Now, there's a world of motion that exists when we play the piano. There's a world of motion that exists when we type. It's much simpler, but still the fundamental ways to move at those keyboards as well as type on the smartphone are very much the same. Now, if we line up the fingers, hand and forearm and move together, the forearm is able to move across from finger to finger, whether it's this keyboard, the piano keyboard, or the computer keyboard, in a way where the fingers do not need to stretch. They are lateral motions and they are rotational motions, which are particularly important for piano playing. Together, they make it possible for us to move across without the fingers having to stretch. When the fingers are connected and move together with the hand and with the forearm, it can get to the piano or to the keyboard and lend a little bit of its support so that the keys can come down with ease. Even on the smartphone, where you have a flat surface, there's a little bit of weight that has to come behind each finger. The moment that happens, the fingers feel strong. They don't feel weak, and they feel that they can move together as a unit. When it comes to twisting, it happens at the piano keyboard, it happens when we don't move properly into the black key area and back out to the white key area. So if we are moving, if we're playing all white keys and suddenly the thumb has to go to a black key, most of the time, or the fifth finger has to move, most of the time people twist. But if the form is moving with us, we can move into the keyboard and out into the keyboard in a way that totally prevents twisting motions. As you see, I'm constantly referring to an alignment. And that also goes into the fact that when the wrist drops down, we call it a break, it breaks the alignment between the hand and the forearm, and the weight falls right into the wrist, which is why we end up with wrist pain. So the hand and the forearm always have to be lined up and moving together. Now, when it comes again to the computer keyboard, the same thing. We go down, we move sideways, we don't stretch, and when we go to the mouse, we're moving as a unit. Why am I talking about the forearm and not the upper arm? The forearm can move very quickly across. Moving from the upper arm is moving from a part that is moved by a very slow and sluggish muscle. So it cannot initiate movement. As the forearm moves, the upper arm just follows in very small amounts, which does not tire it. The forearm also is very light, but has enough weight to accommodate the dropping fingers. When we think about how we move in everyday life, we move as one unit. If I go to pick up something, if I go to my head, if I hold a toothbrush, it's just in the most natural way those parts move together. Somehow, when it came to piano technique, it was not observed, and we got into all those isolated movements and curled movements. When it came to the computer keyboard, we told to be on the home row, which means that the longer fingers have to curl in order to match the shorter fingers, and we end up with curled fingers and with the tension that people talk about. And then very often there's a resting of the wrists down, which creates a break. Some people hold too high. Very often the seat height is not exactly right. When we go to the right, we often twist instead of moving as a unit. When we go to the mouse, we have to move the body a little bit just to be there, always maintaining this major alignment. On the iPhone, what I notice people do is curl and isolate. They move this way. So the curling immediately causes tension. And then when they move up and down, they move it in an isolated way instead of allowing the arm in very small motions to follow the thumb. All this curling, all this tension, very often makes it difficult even to hold on the iPhone. But the moment again, when you let it rest in your hand instead of grabbing and holding tightly and feel the forearm behind you, you realize that you can hold it very, very lightly. And that's what objects feel like. What I'm describing is really the beginning of a process, just to give an understanding that even by lining up the fingers, hand and forearm together and moving as a unit, already there can be relief. No matter what it is that you're doing, whether it's keyboards or it's just daily living, how we move, how we use our hands in a healthy way. There's much more to it. And if you're interested, please log on to ednagolandsky.com. And for computer users, healthytyping.com.